Welcome to the Grassroots podcast,
a platform for agricultural producers to share their stories and engage with consumers.
We are your hosts, Erin
and Laura.
Frequently in the news, we hear discussion of topics that seem distant and far removed from our daily lives as consumers. International trade and tariffs can be such a subject. It's covered often, but we may have difficulty realizing how it is affecting us day to day. Today, we are going to talk with Travis Dyring, a young farmer and businessman located in northern Utah who deals with this issue every day. Many producers in our state grow food, fiber, and forage that end up being utilized by consumers in foreign countries. So, as we dive in, let me introduce today's guest for the Grassroots podcast. Travis Dyring grew up on a family farm in central Utah on a dairy operation in Gunnison. He loved farming, and when he completed a tour of duty in Bucha, Iraq, he returned home and received his bachelor's degree in ag systems from Southern Utah University. He was then offered a management position with Bailey Farms International and relocated to Tremont, Utah. He has become an established member of the community, and he and his wife Megan are raising their 3 small boys there. Travis, welcome to the podcast. Tell our listeners who you are and what you do in the field of agriculture.
My name is Travis Dyring. I work for Bailey Farms International. We export alfalfa along with other forage commodities to other countries in the world.
So how did you get involved in that?
I got to know the Bailey family. It's a family-ran business when I was attending Snow College in central Utah in Ephraim. They offered me a job, come to a northern Utah facility in Tremont.
Did you ever, did you know you wanted to return to ag, or was it something that was more a job of opportunity?
I grew up on a farm, a dairy farm in central Utah. I always wanted to be involved in agriculture some way. This was not a job that I pursued or ever thought that I would be involved in for a career. But it was just an opportunity that came my way, and so we took it. Thought we'd try it for a while and really enjoy it. And I've been doing this for 7 years now.
So you said that you export alfalfa and forage commodities internationally. What are your main markets that you're shipping to?
The main countries that we ship to are in the Middle East, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, some of those other countries, China, Japan, Taiwan, and Korea. The majority of what we export is alfalfa, meadow grass, different grass mixes, oats, and pretty much any dry forage that we can find a market for, and we can find the product to ship them.
Will you take a moment and speak to why it is that U.S. producers are exporting their food and fiber to these countries? Why is it that they aren't just securing it from a more local source?
The countries that we export to don't have either the water or the ground to grow their own forage, or they don't have the right climate to grow dry forages. There is some countries that can grow it themselves, but they don't have the infrastructure in their country to ship it to where they need to feed it, or if they had the animals. Everything we do is for feed, going to livestock, whether it be dairy or beef. They don't have, in some of these countries, they don't have the means to either ship the finished product, being milk or beef, to where the consumers are, or they don't have the means to ship the forage to where the livestock are. It's far cheaper and faster for us here in northern Utah, southern Idaho, to ship these products on the rail or over the road to Long Beach ports, and then over the ocean in containers by boat than what they can do it within their own country.
Where does most of the hay you export come from?
Well, the company I work for has 3 facilities, 2 in central Utah, 1 in northern Utah. Most of the hay that my facility uses comes out of Idaho. But we do draw from Nevada, a little bit from Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Colorado and Wyoming.
Why would they sell their hay to you to be used internationally rather than just to a local market?
Well, they're really 20 years ago, forage commodities were only for local markets. Not only is export big in forage commodities now, but our transportation costs in the United States and the Intermountain West are so cheap that it's feasible now to ship hay all over the country, and that's happening. Dairies are starting to recognize the quality of alfalfa that is grown in the Intermountain West, and they're willing to pay for that to get it moved to wherever they need to feed their cows. But one of the benefits of this is it's another market. And we don't necessarily compete with local markets for the same hay. Dairies around here like to use higher testing hay on a chemical analysis. The markets that we're selling hay to don't necessarily need that. They just need forage or roughage to put into a feed ration that they can't get that in other commodities byproducts that they have.
This episode is brought to you by the Utah Farm Bureau Federation, whose motto is to inspire all Utah families to connect, succeed, and grow through the miracle of agriculture. For more information, visit www.utahfarmbureau.org.
So, what are the biggest challenges that you face actually getting the hay into those international markets? Is it political issues? Is it actual logistics of getting it there? What would you say is the hardest or like the biggest challenges that you face trying to actually perform your job?
Political issues is a big one, especially this year, where just a year ago, about from now, on the 1st of July of 2018, in retaliation to the tariffs that President Trump put on a lot of Chinese imported products, China put a tariff on alfalfa that was imported into their country, and it increased the cost of the delivered alfalfa into China by over $100 a ton, which is, for last year's market value, was about a third more of an increase. So that dramatically affected our markets and also was passed on to producers here in Utah and Idaho. Some of the other issues that we face is market swings. We buy about 80% of the product that we need to produce and ship throughout the year. We buy in 3 or 4 months in the summertime. And if we have big market swings in a downward trend, then we've got a lot of inventory that we could risk losing a lot of money on.
So, what's the hardest part of your job? Not even with getting the hay there, but just at Bailey Farms, what's the hardest part of your job?
The hardest part of my job is keeping all the moving pieces moving in the right direction and together. Sometimes I feel like in my job, I'm dealing with customers on both ends. Our producers feel like they're a customer to us because we're buying their hay. And obviously our customers overseas that we're supplying the hay to and selling the hay to are a customer as well. Trying to keep customers happy on both ends is usually a struggle.
What worries you the most about the hay industry right now?
market swings is what makes me the most nervous. And in the hay industry, that can happen just from hay brokers, hay buyers, dairies, anybody that buys hay, whether they use it themselves or they have a trucking company and want to move hay, or somebody that just wants to be a middleman broker and buy and sell hay. If people get a little too excited and create a false increase in the price of hay and other forage commodities, then it can get us in trouble when things settle back down. Either we won't buy enough product that what we need to supply our customers, or we do buy it and it's too high a priced. Another issue that concerns me is more and more every year we're starting to hear about an issue with water. None of this product that we're buying and selling can be grown without water, irrigation water in agriculture. And in these drier states, we're starting to use up more and more of our water for people, and the population is starting to want to take the water away from the farmer.
There was an article a couple of years ago that was pretty hard hitting against the export hay market, because it was saying that exporting hay was a bad utilization of the water resources that we have here. What would you say is someone who is very closely related to that, how do you argue that, or what is your best defense against that type of thinking or logic?
Well, in my mind, agriculture is what supports all of us that live here in the Intermountain West. And I'm not so sure it's a good idea to be using all of our water just for human consumption. We've got to have industry, and we need water to have that industry here.
Earlier, you brought up the topic of tariffs. As somebody who gets to hear feedback from both customers in local and foreign markets, in your opinion, who has actually been the most greatly affected?
The producers have definitely been mostly affected by the tariffs. The grower, the farmer, is that always trickles back onto. It increased the cost per ton of hay to the consumer in China by $100 a ton, which that didn't directly decrease the worth of farmers' hay by $100 a ton here, but it did create a surplus
Mm-hmm.
of hay here in Utah and Idaho.
Why is hay production and alfalfa production so important to the Intermountain West?
So dairies rely 100% on farms for all of their feed, where dairy cattle are not range cattle.
So, what excites you the most about it? Can be the hay industry, about agriculture. What are some of the things that give you hope or make you excited about where things are going?
Well, one thing that I know for sure is the population grows in the world as everybody needs to eat. These other countries, just the last 20 years, some of these countries we export forage to, mostly for dairy production, they've not had milk and cheese and butter before in their life. And when their economy started to do better and they could afford that, now they've got a taste for it. And they're not going to give that up. They're going to be just like me. When I only have $5 left in my bank account and I go to the grocery store, the two things I am going to buy is milk and bread. And that's the way they are too. Feeding the world, which is what we're doing, is not going to go away. It's only going to get bigger as the population continues to grow. So there's going to be a lot of room for growth and expansion in this industry. I've been, as I mentioned before, I've worked for Bailey Farms for 7 years, and every year where there is more and more demand for our product.
If there is one thing that you think people that aren't familiar with what you do are confused about, or something that you feel like is a recurring question that you get that you would like to clarify or provide some insight on? Is there anything like that that comes to your mind?
Well, one thing that I think about often, I like to clear up with people, especially local people that feel like we are um, we're driving up the market on forage commodities, is as I mentioned before, we're really not. We very seldom compete with local markets for the type of forage that we need to export. And also, as we create another market, which is great for the producers, um, local consumers of that commodity feel like we're driving up the market. But as there's more a market, more production. There's more production that goes in, and when there's more production in, there's more opportunity and availability for local consumers as well. If the exporting forage was cut off completely, there would be a huge drop in prices for alfalfa, for example. But after a few years, production would go down, that would level off, and there wouldn't be as much available to local consumers at all. And I think that's something that is very misunderstood, especially by local consumers, is that by us creating another market, it actually increases the availability for them, not so much just increases the price for what product there is.
We appreciate you coming on here and spending your time talking to us and educating us on the export hay business in Utah and how it affects us as consumers. And I also want to thank you. For those of you who don't know, Travis has served our country in the National Guard and been deployed. And we just want to take a moment to thank you for your service as well, Travis. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Grassroots podcast.
If you loved the show, please subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Plus, share it with a friend, and we will see you next time.